Hello, my name's Morgan. I'm here today with the Vermont Arts Council to talk with you about Poetry Out Loud. Now, I'm sure you're already aware, Poetry Out Loud involves memorizing a poem, depending on your teacher, maybe more than one poem, and then reciting it out loud for an audience. Out loud for an audience. This is never an easy thing to do, especially if you don't have performance experience. So you have to take it a step at a time. First, you memorize the poem. And I want to warn you not to get stuck in a rut. Don't say the words over and over to yourself the same way every time. You want to leave yourself open to be able to discover things about the poem, because as you work on memorization, you come to understand the piece better and better. And at that point, you may decide there's a different feeling to it than you had first thought. And you want to change the way you're saying the words to bring that feeling out. Or you realize that the word you were emphasizing in the line really isn't the important word. There's another word that you should give more weight to. So as you go through the process of memorizing, please, please don't say it the same way every time. And in fact, you should play with it. There's an exercise we do often in theater where we will say lines in crazy ways, maybe with a southern accent or operatically, or saying it as a tragedy or saying it as a comedy, expressing emotions with our voice that you may not think are really in the words. But by doing that, you can often make discoveries about the poem that you didn't realize. You may find something there. So say it many different ways. Say it fast, say it slow, say it loud, say it angrily, say it as a joke. Discover what the words have in store for you. You're going to have memorized a poem, but if you can work at saying it to the audience in what I sometimes call a conversational tone, as if this may be something you've thought about, but you haven't necessarily put into words before. So if you can give yourself the time to make it sound like a fresh speaking of the thoughts, it gives it a real sense of urgency and immediacy instead of, oh, this is just a slew of memorized words that are coming out of my mouth. It's something I've really thought about and I really feel. And it can make a really big difference. I mean, take just a couple of lines, say, from a Robert Frost poem, Stopping by Woods. You might start out with, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. Now think about if there were someone sitting next to you on the carriage seat and you've stopped the wagon and you were going to express what you're thinking about. Whose woods these are? I think I know. His house is in the village, though. See the difference between that? And remember that you are not acting out a poem. What you are doing is becoming the voice of the poem. So if it becomes about you as a person and what you're doing or overacting, that dramatic appropriateness can be too much and it can distract from what you're saying. It needs to be about the words and you giving meaning to those words that helps your audience understand it. And evidence of understanding. Clearly, you need to understand your poem before you can have your audience understand it. And I think it's really more important that you understand what the poem means to you. So you chose it for a reason. It spoke to you for some reason. It was about something that was an experience you may have had yourself, or it reminded you of something, or you loved the sound of the words. Who knows why you chose it. But it becomes very personal in the process of memorization. So that's what you can share with your audience. What you feel inside you about the poem is what you can bring out. And overall performance has to do with putting all these things together. And I sometimes call it the wow factor. When you see a really good performance and say, wow, you may not be thinking about what made that performance so good. But chances are, it's a combination of all the things we've been talking about. How the person uses their body, how they use their voice, how well they're connected emotionally to the material they're talking about. I think that is the main thing that gives a performance that extra zip. Enjambments, I don't know if you've heard this term, but what it refers to is that there isn't necessarily a pause at the end of every line. Really pay attention to the punctuation in a poem, because that's the poet's way of indicating where pauses come. You have a small pause at a comma and a larger pause at a period. Sometimes there is not a pause at the end of a line because the thought that's being expressed continues on into the next line. And it's all right to pause in the middle of a line if it's between thoughts or between pieces of a thought, the ands or the buts or whatever. So be sure that you don't break up a thought. Going to that Robert Frost poem again, there's a line, the one about the wind. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. So those are two lines. But in fact, the thought is the sweep of easy wind. So you want to keep going at the end of that line. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. So that's just an example. And Frost is very good about giving you punctuation to let you know where you should be stopping and where you should not be stopping if there isn't punctuation. Okay, and last, but definitely not least, I think I forgot to mention what I like to call the shift point in a poem. So this is where the poet shifts gears, sort of, usually going from one emotion to something that might be slightly different or might be very different. Sometimes it starts out perhaps with a poet describing a scene and then shifting into what that means, what that scene means to the poet, or what emotion it brings up. The last line, too, is often another shift. It's, for lack of a better term, sometimes the punchline of the poem. It really carries the weight of what the whole thing has been about. But usually there's a point earlier in the poem as well. In the Richard Cory poem I did for you earlier, I think that the speaker of the poem is going from admiration for someone to maybe a sense of their own envy, possibly even to anger about how hard they're working compared to this rich man, Richard Cory. And then at the end, puzzlement. Why this man, who seemed to have everything that the speaker might want, would commit suicide. So that poem happens to have a lot of shifts in it, emotional shifts. But look at your own poem and see where something turns, because at that point you want to be sure that something is also different about your presentation. That's where your tone or pace or pitch or volume, something changes to reflect the shift that the poet has brought into the poem. Study your poem to find those moments. I guarantee you there'll be at least one, possibly two. All right, so I hope this has been helpful to you, and best of luck with your poetry out loud.